you are doing a...
I'll just start the recording of the conversation also. Then we'll,
Right,
we'll go
okay,
into the conversation once you were saying something. So then we'll start the conversation.
No. I'm glad that you're doing something that should be done. It's archival. It has a purpose for history. It has a purpose for the future, which is very important.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that is why we started Karwaan 2 years back, because the situations today are demands that we talk about history, we talk about culture, we talk about heritage, and that we engage ourselves in dialogues, we engage ourselves in conversation.
बिल्कुल सही है.
So, so once you say we'll start the conversation.
जी.
Sure. So 3, 2, 1. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Karwaan. My name is Eshan, and with me I have Saeed Akhtar Mirza Sahab, who doesn't need an introduction, though I'll do a formal introduction of his. So Saeed Akhtar Mirza Sahab is a multiple award-winning filmmaker, and we know all the names of his film, including Albert Pinto ka Gussa Kyon Aata Hai, Salim Langde Pe Matro, Mohan Joshi Haazir Ho, and many, many more. And he's also a writer, a philosopher, a thinker, and he likes to call himself the leftist Sufi that we'll also try to discuss in the conversation itself. He's an essayist, a political activist, and also now a traveler, and he loves exploring. Yeah, and today in this conversation, we'll explore his works in cinema, in writing, also his experiences in his life. So we are going to change the title of this conversation from talking films to talking life and talking experiences with Salim Akhtar Mirza. Thank you so much, sir, for agreeing to do this. Such an honor it is to host you.
No, namaskar to all your listeners and viewers. Namaskar. And I'm very happy that a young person like you is doing something which is so important. It is important for not just for our country, to record our times. Because I think the world is going through an incredible crisis of identity. And it's an issue that all of us have to confront in some form or the other. And then with this COVID coming in, it's a universal thing. Imagine an entire world masked. Just try to imagine this. It's across the world. Everybody is masked today. And it means something, कि मुंह बंद हो चुके हैं, अभी मुंह बंद कर दीजिए आप. दूसरी चीज है, it's a world of isolation. You've isolated yourself, and the idea of mankind and humanity is to meet people and to shake hands and to debate and to talk and to hug, to argue, to discuss things. Or suddenly आप अलग हो गए from other human beings. And that to me is an immense tragedy of our times. And I imagine that coupled with an identity crisis across the world, which is so I would imagine in scoundrel times. So it's good to have young people like you discuss issues and bring things to record it for history. It's very important.
Thank you so much, sir. And we'll start the conversation from your work in cinema, and then we'll go into more detail. So you grew up in a family, and you grew up between films, cinema. Your father was a well-respected writer, screenwriter, and he has written films like Naya Daur, which I personally love. And how was your first encounter with motion pictures? And if you can also remember your memories with the father.
I remember I loved cinema. I just loved the moving image. And I was incredibly love Zaina. With Bina Socho, I would see any kind of film. There's no distinction in my mind, but to sit in a theater and just watch film, cinema. मगर मुझे ये याद है कि my father was also, besides being a writer, was also a historian, and therefore उन्होंने कहा कि Saeed, I know you like cinema, मगर ये भूलना मत कि हर किस्म की फिल्में होती हैं. There are all kinds of cinema around the world, not just the kind that you're watching, which is popular and in the screens. A lot of people are making great cinema which you might not necessarily see or dunya bhar mein, around the world, from Japan and from Russia and from Brazil and from South Africa, and There's lots of cinema emerging. So वो भी देखना जरूरी है for you to get an understanding of things. So he actually cautioned me कि देखिए ये what आप जो देख रहे हैं, it's one kind of cinema, but the world of cinema is much larger than what you're seeing. और वो बहुत जरूरी है. And the linkages of that cinema with histories of people, histories of countries. जब जुड़ जाता है, when it mixes up with histories of people and countries, then something else is going to happen. और मुझे याद है कि पहली बार जब मैं 14 साल की उम्र में, my father gave it like a birthday present, and at the age of 14, it was my birthday, and I thought my father forgot my birthday. मगर शाम का वक्त मैं स्कूल से वापस आ रहा था, and a little van came by and dropped by, and then they uploaded a projector and reels. And when I reached my house, the entire neighborhood children were in my house, and they were invited to see a film. That was my father's birthday present. It was a film that he said, please see this film as your birthday present. It was a Russian film called Battleship Potemkin. Battleship Potemkin is a masterpiece, an icon. It was considered one of the finest films ever made in the history of cinema, But it was an eye-opener for me. But yeah, films ऐसे भी होती हैं. Films like this are also there. And then we also had, we would see films like, Bicycle Thieves or Pather Panchali, and suddenly your world is opening up from beyond what you already love as as cinema. And you are growing up with that, So initially I was quite confused by these different kinds of images floating around your mind in your head. Magar, yeah, that was it. So suddenly you realize that simultaneously you are linking up with literature, because a lot of these great works were from literature and poetry and music. It was another way of seeing. So I think I got a very holistic upbringing about this medium, and not just this medium, through that history and poetry and politics about countries, and their histories. So yes, it was a much wider scope from which I entered the field of cinema. But I also know that when I graduated in Bombay from in economics and political science. So that itself is another journey. And then I didn't go to films because I realized that this profession has a certain uncertainty in it of making a living, and because I could see the struggle that my father was going through purely as a writer. So I didn't join films immediately. I went into advertising. I got a job. I did a course in marketing and advertising. I got a job. I started working. I got married. I had 2 children. और फिर उसके बाद I said enough. हो गया है ये and I need to get out because my heart was not in this kind of work. I knew I wanted to get back to cinema. I wanted to get back to something that I really loved. And that's when my wife decided to say, why, what are you doing? Because your heart is somewhere else. Why are you doing this work? I said, we are married, we've got 2 children. Ab kya karenge? You've got to bring up children, you've got to look after them, and it's very important. So she said, don't worry, I'll work. Yeah, you get down to what you have to do. So, like I said, at the age of 30, I quit everything. And I went to the film school in Pune. The thing is, I could have gone straight into cinema. I had enough contact, but I really wanted to see cinema in a different kind of way. And I knew that cinema was much more than what I had experienced. So that's when I joined the Film and Television Institute in 1973. I joined the film school, and I was 30 years old. I had 2 children, and I spent 3 years over there. And those 3 years really sort of shaped me and made me what I am today. Those 3 years were quite intensive. So that's my journey basically in cinema.
So that inciting incident that in screenplay, there's an inciting incident in the first 5 to 30 minutes of the film where the character gets into the action of the whole sequence. So that came quite late in your life. That's when you were in your 30s. Uh,
Absolutely. 30 years old and married and 2 children. भैया तो वो ये आसान चीजें नहीं है.
so can you
But
talk in certain details about your experiences at FTI, what you learned and who were your teachers? What all?
you must remember the FTI उस जमाने में अभी आप लोगों के पास इंटरनेट है and you're on the net, so you have access to a lot of information at your fingertips. At that time, it wasn't so. And now we had the Film and Television Institute in Pune, and right next door to it was the National Film Archives. Next door, and it played a very critical role in our tutoring, because suddenly you had the cinema of the world coming to you. It is at your doorstep. So every single day we saw cinema from all over the world. I mean, from the French and German and Italian and Japanese and Chinese and Vietnamese and Russian and Hungarian and Polish and Chilean cinema, plus the new way that we're in India at that particular point of time. The works, the films of Mrinal Sen and Satyajit Ray and Adur Gopalakrishnan, and then suddenly you get the films of Mani Kaul and Kumar Shahani. So, ये सब चीजें हो रही है और you're in the midst of all of that. And then also simultaneously, you're seeing a lot of very strong political cinema emerging. From places like Algeria or Argentina or Brazil, And so you're getting a mix of all kinds of cinemas, and you're getting cinemas that are reflecting the change that's occurring in Europe after the Second World War. A devastated Europe, और वहाँ से जब सिनेमा निकलता है, those cinemas of say Fellini or films in Germany or in France. Look at the cinema that emerged. Then, of course, you've got the devastated lands of Eastern Europe, of Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Russia, Poland, Hungary, North Africa. Look at this. You're getting a ringside seat of world history. You're on the ringside seat. You're right up front and seeing a world, the history of the world, which is happening in front of your eyes. And if you're young and if you're curious, it's going to change your life. And for the young people over there who joined, I remember I was 30 years old. I was also incredibly well-read, actually, in point of fact. But those other young people, for them, it changed their lives. It changed the way they saw the world, not just cinema. And you could see how it changed the way they saw the world, because even an editor became more nuanced. Even the music, how do you score music? It wasn't loud, it became more subliminal. Performances turned in a certain kind of way. Cinematography, editing, direction, screenplay writing, handling of actors. ये जो तब्दीलियां आती हैं उसमें, it is a sea change. और फिर यही लोग यहाँ जो FTI के थे, they went and joined the mainstream cinema. Then you see the change that occurs in technology in the Bollywood films and films from Chennai, cinematography, the kind of sound recording that's being done now, the music that's being recorded, and they're all students from the FTI. So a lot of changes are occurring, even in the popular cinema. This is a massive journey, both of content and technology, both the shift in the subtlety of technology, ये सब चीजें हैं. Yeah, that's what the FTI did. That's what it did.
Yeah. So you also taught at FTII for a while. You taught film there. So do you think that filmmaking can be taught, or is it a self-exploration journey, or in self, exploring oneself and one's
No,
film?
nothing. No, no. If you do not have it in you, nothing can be taught. Quite honestly. But all you can do as a teacher is to all that you can do as a teacher is perhaps to inspire and let be. You're not there to tell them what to make. You're there to find out what they want to do and help them do it. The point is, it's not that you're a teacher. You're more of a guide and a friend. And if you think that you know more than them, you're wrong. You never should be that kind of teacher. You have to be. You have to grant every individual his or her space, because it is an act of creation, all said and done. It's not just. It is not engineering. Yeah, this is you're creating pieces of work which require immense, I don't know, intuition and courage and fantasy and imagination, and sometimes it's absurd, sometimes it's wise, sometimes it's nonsensical. It all mixes up, and then sometimes it also has elements of history or the grotesque, and it's you when you yes. So I did when I graduated from FTI. I used to go there quite regularly after, in between films, to take classes and teach. But the point is not teach. It is to be able to converse with, have a dialogue with, and that was more important, because to say this entire thing of guru shishya, I don't think because the shishyas were as much of gurus as the guru was a shishya. It is a mix of both. तो ये दिक्कत ये थी, अगर आपने तय किया कि सिर्फ मैं जानता हूँ, कोई और जानता नहीं है, there's a problem with that. It is incredibly arrogant कि आप जानते हैं और उसमें दिक्कत हो जाती है. It's a problem that you are the fountainhead of wisdom, and that and that the student out there is like an empty vessel, receiving wisdom. It's not true. It's not true. It's not true at all.
Yes, and you mentioned some political films, the term political films, and that reminded me of a very popular quote by Jean-Luc Godard that, the angle at which you set your camera, it itself a political decision.
Oh,
And
yes.
and that brings me to a very cliche question, that can art be apolitical in any sense of it?
Well, the very fact that you choose a particular subject is a political act. It doesn't matter, even if it's a love story. The point I'm getting at is there is nothing that is not a decision which has very strong undertones of politics in a strange way. When you say that I want to make people laugh and entertain, it's a worldview. It's a worldview, and why shouldn't there be entertainment? But it's a worldview. As much as somebody who says, I want to make. So the point I'm thinking that I don't think there's any act of creation which can be seen as being apolitical, because if you are aware of the world in which you live, and in that you create, it's a combination of consciousness and freedom. It's a mix of both. And when you combine the two, not leaving one for the other, something great happens. But if you forget that you're living in a world in which that, for instance, if you take into that, if you forget that you're living in the world where recently more than 20 million or 25 million people had to walk and cycle and bicycle back to their homes when a complete lockdown occurred. If you forget that fact and still make cinema, then something is wrong with you. Not that it will come into your films, But at the back of your head, you have to remember that this is also the world you've inherited. You know, migrant workers, and they march and they walk and they bicycle and their families and the mile after mile they had to go with no buses, no trains, no. That's the world you live in, yeah. How can you forget that as you create? And I'm not suggesting that has to come into your films, but it has to be in your mind somewhere. So I don't think there's any act of creation that denies all other realities simultaneously. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, that's very true, and you have said it, that nothing can be apolitical in the world that we see.
Yeah.
So, what were some of the films that you watched during your FTI days that remained with you till now, that you often?
बहुत सारे हैं, बहुत सारे. I'll give you an example. Like for instance, if you see Satyajit Ray's Pathe Panchali, if you see that piece of work, because it's not overtly political, doesn't make it not political. Satyajit Ray was a very perceptive man. And he perceived life in Bengal in a certain kind of way at a time which is historical and deeply sensitive and also deeply political. But you don't have it's not a sloganeering film, but it's very deeply conscious, the film. The other alternative is a film like, say, Bicycle Thieves, the Victoria de Sica, after the Second World War, Bicycle Thieves made by Victoria de Sica. Now that's a very conscious political film. And then you have films like Battle of Algiers, where the Algerian freedom struggle against the French. It is incredibly powerful. मुझे जब तक याद है जब फिल्म दिखाई गई हमारे FTI के ऑडिटोरियम में, फिल्म खत्म हुई, there was silence for 2 minutes in the auditorium. Silence. And then the students got up and started clapping. They had been hit by a thunderbolt. The real part of political cinema. ये भी हो सकता है. And I don't know, Out of the Furnaces from Argentina. Palestinian films on Vietnam. Films documentaries made by a very young then Anand Badradhan. The things were happening, and then also simultaneously you had great literature being recorded and great works of storytelling also happening. So it was a kind of a mix. But to me, all of that was political. All of that together. It was a bouquet of all kinds of genres, all kinds of visions, all kinds of word use. And you must also remember who are these filmmakers? वो कौन थे? जिसका काम हम देख रहे हैं, who were they? They were entertainers, they were clowns, they were dropouts, they were musicians, they were philosophers, they were anarchists, they were Marxists, they were fascists, they were playwrights, they were poets, writers, and they were creating. So the makers and their backgrounds are also very important, huh? And all of them, when you see their work, it's what a musicians, dropouts. Their cinema we were all viewing. So it was an incredible experience. And all those people had agendas. They all were iconoclasts, sub-iconoclasts, and they were all so different from each other. Also completely different from each other.
And you also made a film that I think has a very interesting story, Slum Eviction. You made it during your FTI days itself.
Yeah, it is a film. Girish Karnad was our director of the FTI. You must remember, we also director of the FTI, and there was some agitation occurring, agitation occurring in the city of Mumbai, where some 70,000 people were being evicted for development. 70,000 people were being evicted. So Girish got an offer from somebody from Doordarshan. He said, why don't one of your students go and direct this, see what's happening over there and direct that film? So Girish asked me to go and see it. And so we went to the team. Cameraman Jahangir Chaudhary, we went, and sound recordist to record the event. And we did it, we shot it, we recorded both sides to be democratic. It was 70,000. It is a slum development area. It is slum, which is called, I think, Janta Colony. And it was being removed and replaced to another location, because on that same plot was coming up the Bhabha Atomic Research Center, quarters for all the scientists. So now at one point you've got high-end India emerging, the atomic research people, and their living quarters are going to be built over there. And there was 70,000 people being removed to make place for them. It was very ironic, and there it was. So I covered that story. And I think we did a pretty good job. And when we finished the editing, the day we finished the editing, it was ready, the film. The next day, the emergency was announced. And at that particular point of time, the film could not be screened at all. They said, sorry, we can't show this film. Later, it was found out, okay, when we tried to retrieve it, they said, no, sorry, the negative is lost. वो negative जो है वो खो गया है. So a film that we shot with great passion and I think with great honesty and integrity couldn't be seen by anybody. But that's the way it is. You learn from these things, Eshan. You learn the nature of the state. You learn about stuff when you get banned, you get stopped. You're trying to say something about a world that you've inherited, and then I'm trying to imagine what Anand goes through every time he makes a film. But this is the first film that I was making. I said no, I'll go into feature film. Bhaiya, ये documentary में दो ही दिक्कत है. When you go to documentaries, that'd be a problem. But you realize something which is very clear, is that cinema is a very powerful tool. It can be a very powerful tool. And no state in the world wants it to be completely independent of the state. No state in the world would want it to be, because they realize that bhaiya agar isko freedom mil jaye completely, to tehelka mat jayega. That is the problem. Yeah.
But do you think there are certain limitations with the medium of cinema itself?
There are no limitations with the medium itself, but it's also the times in which 1975, the world, 1974, the entire world was in upheaval. दुनिया भर में पता नहीं क्या क्या चीजें हो रही थी. Upheavals in Africa, Latin America, Asia, the Vietnam War, the Naxalite movement of here, the northeast of India was up, insurrections, the northeast Nagaland and Manipur, things were happening there. Jayaprakash Narayan movement is the Nirmaya movement is about to start in Gujarat. तो पता नहीं दुनिया भर में चीजें हो रही थी. तो liberation movements in Africa, हजारों की तादाद में, South Africa, Namibia, Congo, and in Angola, Nigeria में, Egypt में पता नहीं क्या हो रहा है. A world is up, and in that time you see yourself not just as an Indian, you're seeing a world, and in which you participate as an artist. You try to participate as an artist. So that is what we were trying to do. I was trying to do. And I was always deeply political.
Yeah. So do you think there is a certain social responsibility of an artist or a filmmaker towards the society that they inherit? Because you just mentioned about the responsibility.
It's a responsibility. It's a mental makeup. And it's not that I would do it that way. I do not. It does not mean I hold it against somebody else who doesn't do it that way. I see myself in that position, and that's what I am. And if I see an agitation or a movement that I think I support, I will go out on the street and sit in. Even at this age, I sit. I can go to a demonstration that if I believe in it, I will go and sit down and say, I'm on your side. Even today. It doesn't mean everybody else has to. ये नहीं कि वो कम है और मैं ज्यादा हूँ. It is not that at all. It is not that. I'm not trying to make myself comparing myself to others, and nor do I want that comparison. But just that's the way I am. That's the way I am, and that's the way I should be. And I have immense respect for people whose work I admire, who never perhaps participated in any demonstration, but make great cinema, which is as provocative as anything else. So, but I personally feel that I'm not just a filmmaker, I'm also a social animal and a political animal. And therefore I participate to the best, to as much as I can. Even when I write, when I travel, it's just
Yes, and we'll come to that aspect also. But before that, your first feature film, Arvind Desai ki Ajeeb Dastaan, and before going to that, even all these names, these all quirky, whimsical, these quotable titles of your films are always helpful in when we play the dumb charades and games like that. How did you how did you come up with such names?
because like I said, see, the thing is, with me personally, it's I wanted my films to be as democratic as possible. Now it's it's strange what I said. No matter what you make, even the title itself has to be democratic. So जब आप टिकट खरीदने जाते हैं, आप you're not going to see a film called Manoranjan where you don't know what it means. क्या होगा? आप टिकट खरीद रहे हैं. I want a ticket for Arvind Desai ki Ajeeb Dastaan. You know, there's a chap called Arvind Desai who's going to be there in the film. और उसकी दास्तान अजीब होगी शायद. I'm having a conversation with you as a viewer. I'm having a conversation with my viewers. I'm having a conversation. It's a dialogue. And if you agree or disagree both ways, it's fine with me. But I'm having a conversation. और फिर एल्बर्ट पिंटो को गुस्सा क्यों आता है? होगा एल्बर्ट पिंटो को गुस्सा आने वाला, मगर क्यों? और आप देखने वाले हैं, and you will see it, and you will decide whether it's valid or not. But I am having a conversation with you as a viewer simultaneously. I am trying to tell you, bhaiya, you're not seeing something unknown. You are going in with a certain, a little about the film, or फिर we can have a debate. So that was the intention. The only time when I didn't have that, it was when the last one that I made was called Naseem. And I didn't want to be democratic in that at all. That was it. But the point is, I saw cinema as a dialogue with an audience, and you can have a conversation with them. And it didn't matter if they disliked it. To me, it was as much of if they liked it, but it was a discourse, a conversation with the viewers, and that was the intention.
So when you say of cinema, a film should be democratic. So can you explain on
Well,
that?
no, my cinema.
Yeah. So
That's it.
yeah. So can you
Sorry.
explain how democracy? How do you place democracy in, or how do you understand democracy in cinema and in your cinema?
I tell you for very little details of the work that I do and the way I saw it. Like for instance, you will never get a camera angle which is a low angle shot or a top angle shot. It will be at eye level, neutral. I am not emphasizing nor am I de-emphasizing. It is allowing the viewer space, not over dramatizing under. It is just there. You decide. Therefore, even your camera angle, the use of sound that you use is very simple. It's not nothing which is going to be over the top drama. Nothing. So, in other words, I am, even if the story is dramatic, your job is to present it as objectively as you can to an audience, to remove anything that might look like, most often, as often as possible, that you're underlining something. When you underline, I didn't do that with my work. So in that sense, that's what I mean by democracy. Also, you don't use the implements of the camera and the sound and the music to underline, dramatize unnecessarily. Let it be. Not that I didn't have music. Of course I had music. But it is never over the, not that I didn't, of course I had camera shot. Never, I didn't allow it for it to dictate to the audience as to how to see it. It is flat on image. So that is what I mean by democratic, the work that I did. You judge, as a viewer, you judge it on that basis. And you take sides, or you decide you liked it or disliked it. Left to you. So that is what I mean by also as far as possible to avoid close-ups as much as possible. The closest I would come will be mid-close. It will be about, that's the closest I would come. And it's never the close-up. But the close-up is an angle, it's a shot. Now I decided to not do that. And so therefore you get very few close-ups in my film, almost negligible. So, you follow what I'm saying? The close-up is, yeah.
Definitely, and this was one thing that I also noticed when I was seeing for say Ajeeb Dastaan and Salim Langde Pe Matro. Your first feature film Arvind Desai ki Ajeeb Dastaan was actually funded by a collective of you and your friends called Yukt Film Co-op.
Yeah.
So can you talk
No,
about?
it wasn't. No. We had formed a cooperative, Yukt, of 16 students from the FTI, 16 the. 4 directors, 4 cinematographers, 4 sound recorders, 4 editors, and 1 actor. Om Puri was the actor. He was one of us. And I think we had 3 editors. The point was we decided to, it is that you're not alone. आप अकेले नहीं हैं और एक हैं आपके साथ, दोस्त हैं आपके साथ, and you are trying to create cinema which is going to be difficult to create, and therefore the need for a group around. So therefore I'm here, it's like and we called it Yukt. It was Manikol's idea. So Manikol was one of the directors. Manikol, Hariharan, Saeed Mirza, and who was the 4th? I'm old. So 4 directors, 4 cameramen. Virinder Saini, Manmohan Singh, Binod Pradhan, and Rajesh Joshi were the 4 cinematographers. And things like, so the point was that it was an attempt of saying let's start a film cooperative so that cinema can be made through that. And then it will be a kind of a beacon for younger people to come in and then join. And a movement can start. And a movement and a forum for what you would imagine would be a different kind of cinema. So we made two films. One is called Ghashiram Kotwal. The first one, and the second one was called Arvind Desai Ki Ajeeb Dastaan, which I wrote. And by the way, it was scripted by Vijay Tendulkar, the famous playwright. So Tendulkar Sahab and I, and Cyrus Mistry, the three of us wrote that script. So the point is, it is an attempt to say that it's, start a movement that could be like a beacon to the rest of the countries to start it, get together. And yeah.
Now that you mentioned Vijay Tendulkar, मेरे दिमाग में एक जहन में एक और सवाल आ रहा है, which is unrelated, but you have kind of worked with three or more literary legends like Vijay Tendulkar, Kafi Azmi Sahab, and Bhisham Sahani, and both Kafi Sahab and Bhisham Sahab worked with you as actors. Very rare in their career, but how was working with these literary legends? What were your experiences?
I've never seen more professional people because they come from a tradition of, they know their words. They know exactly what their value is. They don't have to show off about anything. वो हैं, वो जानते हैं कि वो जानते हैं. So you don't have to show off them. वो जानते हैं कि वो जानते हैं. बस. So there's no showing off, there's no tamasha. The inside, all right, fine, we करेंगे. मुझे अब तक याद है when I, Kavi Sahib and I were good old drinking partners. We used to go to his house, we used to open a bottle of rum, we used to have rum together, chit chat about the world, philosophy, poetry, music, patne kya kya. So when I was doing Naseem, I told him, I said, Kafi Sahib, मैं ये film बना रहा हूँ, and I want you to आप उस पे काम करें. तो उन्होंने कहा, क्या कहा तुमने? मैं कहा, मैं सोचा कि अगर आप उसमें, you can be an actor उसमें. एक मिनट रुक जाओ. He stopped me mid-air and he yelled out, Shaukat. He called his wife Shaukat. She came with, Zara suno. I should call me Saeed Akhtar Mirza Sahib. Everything. All together. Never. Suno ke Saeed Akhtar Mirza Sahib kya keh rahe hain? So I repeated my request कि आप मेरी फिल्म में काम करें. He turned to Shaukat and said, सुना तुमने? मैं अब तक जिंदा हूँ. He turns to me and says, हाँ मैं तुम्हारी फिल्म में काम करूँगा. It was, he was history. And so was Bhisham Sahib. My God, Bhisham Sahib is, here you have a poet and there you've got an incredible writer. An incredible writer who chronicled India and its history, Bhisham Sahib. So when I was making Mohan Joshi Haazir Ho, I just knew I required. If you see Mohan Joshi Haazir Ho, as a structure, it has 4 structures. One film may charge 4 structures, and I mixed them all. One is the documentary. One is the fiction. The dramatic narrative. The third dramatic narrative. The fourth is a tamasha. I mixed them all into one form. But the documentary had to have a face. Unseen. And the documentary is Bhisham Sahib. In this world of dramatic narrative, tamasha, fiction, documentary. He's the documentary in the whole thing. I mean, mixing up 4 forms at that particular point of time was, I don't know how I did it, because I just felt play games with form, play games with stylistics, play games with, anyway.
And you've as you, in your own words, you have played games while making films. You were making television, you were making travelogues,
Oh,
documentary, and mixing up all.
absolutely, absolutely. Any medium. But the point Eshan was saying what he wanted to say. Never anything that he didn't want to say. We did not do anything that we did not want to do. Critically important. Nothing for the sake of just, yeah, kuch to karna. No, never, ever. So, yeah, but we did everything. Travelogues, documentaries, television serials, films. Both, and you mix it up because I was, it helps you. It helps you because you're mixing up form, content, you're mixing up, and then I started writing. Then you've gone from there into writing. So, yeah, it's a journey. And teaching, and not to forget, I a lot of teaching simultaneous, both FTI, sometimes at the Jamia Millia, and then at SRFTI in Calcutta. So I did a lot of teaching also, fair amount, workshops, teaching.
In Salim Langde Pe Matru, because you mentioned documentary, this reminded me that there's a scene where there's a documentary being shown on the Bhiwandi riots. So I wanted to ask you, was that a real documentary or was that shot for especially for the film?
Anand Patwardhan's documentary. It was making the rounds of the city. It's real documentary made by Anand Patwardhan. And it is going from Mahalla to Mahalla. And we brought it in over here. I asked Anand for permission. So I said, bring it in over here because, Anand is a incredible filmmaker. He should take his work into the Mahallas, into the, and let it seen by people. And the kind of thing that he's done to stem this tide of hate and that he's attempted to do all his life. And Anand and I go back a long, long way. I've known him as a kid, with his mouth organ and guitar, He's a incredible work.
Do you still remember the name of the documentary by Patwardhan Sahab? By Anand Patwardhan, the name of the documentary that you showed.
Bhiwandi, I think it's called Bhiwandi. I think it's called Bhiwandi, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's called Bhiwandi. I have all his work here somewhere here with all his films here.
I was going through an article very recently. It was about Salim Langde Pe Matru, and I came across an interesting trivia actually there, that one of the seeds of Salim Langde Pe Matru were sown during the shooting of Mohan Joshi Haazir Ho. It was an accident that you met a young Muslim boy, and
yeah. I don't try to create stories, but I pick up stories of what I see. We were shooting Mohan Joshi Haazir Ho, and we were shooting in a chawl in a very rough area in the city of Mumbai. We were shooting, and we had cordoned off this place to prevent unnecessary crowds from coming into the chawl, and we were all ready for the shoot. And suddenly there was a commotion at the one gate, and one young man, I was on the second floor of the chawl, and a young man starts walking down from the gate right in front, far ahead. He starts walking down the main corridor of the chawl. I was about to shout at him. He stopped, until I was nudged by a man called Rafiq Bhai, who's my local protector. Ki bhaiya, he didn't, not necessarily just keep quiet, let it be. I said, why? I said, fellows, he says, just let it be. And then he talked, my young man re-strutted that, he was it. He was king of the road. And he felt like he owned the place. That was his walk. And then he did a few salutations here and then he decided to go away. And I asked him, who's this fellow here? He said he's one of the hitmen of the Dawood Ibrahim gang. He's one of the hitmen. And his name is Shiva. But that walk like he owned. Cocky and, macho, incredibly macho. But he didn't know that he was on a dead-end street. He never knew that. He is to me, when I saw him, I saw all of that, the macho-ness, etc., and the fact that he is a hitman and there were people are frightened of him. But he doesn't realize, actually, at another level, he's a tragedy of history. He doesn't realize that he has reached where he has because he wasn't given a chance in life. And he has probably had a very tragic childhood, tragic family situation. And he's come up from his bootstraps and found a way to assert himself in this world and say, I am something. But he's going to end up, he's on a one-way street. And he's going to end up dead somewhere. And I thought of that whole story behind him. And I said, my God, here's a film. Here's an entire film. In that one walk. And I decided to do a little research then on these guys, on these young bucks who are wanting to become big in the underworld because they have nowhere else to go. No jobs, no education, no nothing, just stuck to being an electrician somewhere or a plumber somewhere, So, yeah, you want to break free, you want to come out of the ghettos both of your mind and the space in which you live, And it's tough. It's tough. And especially if you're a Muslim now. Therefore, Salim Langde who's ghettoized, and he has his heroes, he has his thing then, and that's why, there's those entire scenes with his future brother-in-law about history, Aslam, about history, and yeah, so that's how I see cinema. Like I said, I'm deeply political.
And the initial name of the character was changed from Karim to Salim, if I'm not wrong.
And the area where there was another hoodlum over there called Karim Lala, who said, oh, yaar, we are allowing you to shoot in our mohalla, yaar. We trust you, we respect you, but you please change the name. I said, well, what does it make a difference to him, to me? Yaar? Okay, fine. So Salim Maghreb Matro. It was Karim Maghreb Matro, and then I said, and the point is that every small-time thug or a part-time punk of a crook, they have names. Salim Mangla, Salim Chechak, Salim Handa, Salim Tempo. These are phrases that are of the street. And Salim Chechak. So it's a descriptive thing of which Salim are you talking about? Honda ke baare mein baat kar rahe. So right in the beginning of the film, I had that whole thing. He walking in the center of the road. Like he owns it. And there's a bus coming behind him. And he's walking, he owns the road. And he says, it's a monologue when he speaks. He says, Vietnam Salim hai.
The film starts from that monologue. That film.
Yeah, I know. And he says, yaar, ek ladi paltoge to 5 rasan nazar aayenge. Ek ladi, you know what's a ladi? In the Godowns, you have those things, you like cockroaches. Ladi paltoge, to 5 nazar aayenge. Salim Teja, Salim Harda, Salim Tempo. Main Salim Nagla. And the language that we picked up by recording, we spent months researching the language. Language. What do they speak? Especially if you're Konkani, that's one kind of language. If you're Hyderabadi, Dakkani, you speak another kind of Hindi. If you're yeah, it's whatever, but the language mix. So it's all researched. It's all researched.
You also dedicated the same film to one of the most important, a revolutionary of sorts of our time and the generation before me, Safdar Hashmi. You know,
I knew I got to earlier, and I just he was like, I was amazed by this man. I was amazed by this man. I said, here's a leader of men. Here's a genuine leader of men. Incredibly talented, incredibly erudite, wonderful speaker, and committed. And when he died, so I just felt I needed to dedicate this film to him, which I did so. Safdar Hashmi. But I've dedicated all my films to somebody or the other. I dedicated Mohan Joshi to Baljeet Singh, a young sound recordist who died, incredibly talented young man who died. And I dedicated, I think, to my father, to my mother, and to Mickey Patel, a very close friend of mine. So it's like, that's how I see films. What is it? It is personal, and it's also a conversation with the audience. It's a person, it's also a conversation.
Next aspects of your film is that city plays a big role in your setting. So what purpose does city play in your films rather than just mere settings or backgrounds?
City defines a person, where you come from. If you live in a certain kind of space, it determines your outlook towards life. If you live in a ghetto, if you live in a slum, your attitude towards life is of a certain kind. If you live in a plush 8-bedroom house overlooking the sea, on Carter Road or something, or Marine Drive, your outlook towards life is far more, expensive. Or imagine traveling by train every single day of your life in those compartments, stuck together like sardines, and you're traveling every single day. What is the output that you get? How will you see the world? How angry will you be about life? These are things that make people the way they are. Also, the environment, the spaces in which they find themselves in. We don't seem to recognize that. We don't seem to realize that the spaces in which you live determine so much of the kind of person that you are. And it's very important. And I think it's very important. So yeah, the city does play, and it's a city I know. I was born in Bombay, lived all my life here, but I don't intend dying here. I intend dying somewhere else. But the point is, I've reached a stage of trying to figure out, finding a place where I can say, this is the place where I can sit down and die. I can, it'll probably be in the hills somewhere. I'm not going to die in the city, Bombay. I want out. And I have a place in Goa. But that's not either the place that I want to. So, behind me are the 2 drawings of my 2 grandchildren just behind me. And I love those drawings at the back, because there's so much hope in them. those two young children, they're my grandchildren. And there's so much hope in them. I wish them all the best, you know. I wish them well. I wish they get a world which is happy and peaceful and compassionate and friendly and non-competitive, you know, that sings and dances and recites poetry. Yeah, it's a world they want. We're very far from that. But let's hope.
Yes, and I had a question relating to there's this conflict that exists between realism versus optimism or say hope. दुनिया ऐसी है versus दुनिया ऐसी हो. इसमें एक बहुत conflict. It's a continuous conflict that exists in our society. How do you see it as a writer and as a filmmaker?
And you know, see, the point is, that's exactly what I did with Arvind Desai. You see the life of Arvind Desai, and simultaneously, अगर आप देखें, I started with the carpets weavers somewhere in Agra, वो अपना काम कर रहे हैं. And then I come into his world. Arvind Desai, the whole film is his world now. But he dies on a carpet. He gets shot on a carpet, and then I go back to the world of the weavers. So I'm trying to see the interconnectedness of things. We are linked with each other, and therefore, one is the world that we have, and one is the world that we that we would like to be in. And that's the problem with politics, also simultaneously. Therefore, when you have these incredibly funny films from Hollywood, fun films, I don't know, whatever they are, those films, which are, now you need to be funny, but if you look at the American society, you see two things. You see the world of the billboard, the billboard and the hoardings, beautiful work, lovely women, men, children, families, and lovely life, and then if you come down to the street, what do you see? You see heartache, you see desperation, you see frustration. It's right before you, in front of you. So these are the two words that you're talking about. Simultaneously, it's staring you in the face. So your aspiration might be that billboard, or that hoarding, that beautiful hoarding, but on the street, what are you getting? These are things which you notice immediately, and I'm not saying not just America, I'm talking about India simultaneously. Look at that, it's we only look at the hoarding. If you look on the street, then maybe something else is going to happen with the cinema that you create. If you mix the two together, and something else is going to happen. But if you refuse to see the street, then there's a problem with the cinema.
And that's where I bring the question that realism and truth is usually found. This naturalism is found in independent cinema mostly, and words like utopianism or dreamland or something like which is escapism of sorts is quite visible, strikingly visible in mainstream cinema. So how do you see this state?
No, but I think it's changed, hasn't it changed considerably with this new OTT tamasha that's happening? I don't know, but there's a lot of dark nights are emerging from there. A lot of angst and pain and anger is emerging from there, but which is quite frightening, actually, in point of fact. But the idea of escape and entertainment is a questionable thing. Of course, you need to escape sometimes from the world you live in, and you need to look at things in a far more relaxed manner as possible. But if that is the only criteria for cinema, then it becomes a problem. when you mix the two, then you get something far more enriching and far more lasting. I think what's happened nowadays is, I was seeing some of the films that you get on the OTT platforms today. It's quite, it's a dark world. It's a pretty, I wonder what's happening out there, because it's an incredible identity crisis occurring now, it seems. It's very, very funny, but and also at times quite despairing. Okay, क्या हो रहा है? An excessive amount of violence, excessive amount of gratuitous sex, excessive amount of, I don't know, anger. And maybe it's valid, maybe it's not, I don't know. Sometimes you wonder where it's coming from. Sometimes you wonder where it's coming from, you know, what's happening. There's another world outside that is suddenly revealing itself. Maybe it needs to be revealed, I don't know. Maybe it is important. But we are in the world is in pretty difficult times. We are in pretty difficult times, both politically and economically. We've reached a kind of an end, a kind of a dead end. And we don't know where to turn. It seems like that. We don't know where to turn. Because all you know is that we have an economic and financial system that no longer can guarantee the good life. You know that's a fact now. And what is the alternative then? And you have a political system that has given up its hands in governance, and it's reached all kinds of other areas of deciding. You know, it reaches, it's delving into hate, into racism, into all kinds of patriotism, jingoism. It's like and it's a world that is fracturing, in a sense. It's fracturing across, and it worries. But then maybe it's also because it reflects our times. Maybe it reflects our times.
Talking about our times, in your book, "Memory in the Sea of Amnesia," you mention a quote that, you know, the struggle of men against power is a struggle of memory against forgetting.
Yeah.
And so, why do you think it is important to talk about these collective memories that you showed in your films and in your writings to this world?
You know, if you forget those millions of people going back to their homes during the lockdown, the first 4 hours, a nation of 1.3 billion people were given 4 hours. 4 घंटे मेरे लोगों को कि भाई सब बंद होने वाला है, घर में रहो, सब बंद होने वाला है. Now it's a decision, very decisive. It sounds like very decisive personality. देखा, जिसको कहते हैं ruling. What is not realized is there are 200 million people in this country who are, and those 200 million people happen to be what we would call, in earlier times, we would call slave labor. 200 million people. They are migrant workers across the country. Migrant. The lucky ones are those जो अपने गांव से थोड़ी देर 10 किलोमीटर पास शहर में छोटे से टाउनशिप पे आए, नौकरी मिल गई. So they can go back to their gowns, they can go back. Because you don't require no buses, trains. 40 million have traveled hundreds and thousands of miles across the country. No buses, no trains, no aircraft, nothing. And they have no homes to go because they've been told stay at home. मगर घर यहाँ नहीं है जहाँ वो काम कर रहे हैं, घर कहीं और है, उनको वापस जाना है. Do you know what that means to them? And because they're daily wage earners, वो क्या करेंगे? हम तो रह गए अपने घरों में. हमें what did we actually face as middle class or upper middle class people? What did we actually face? Actually, nothing. They had to go back home because they were paying their rent month to month. And they had to go back home. And what happened to them? Now, television cameras recorded for about a fortnight, and then images went. No more images. Not even headlines. Newspapers, but no headlines either. Memory was stopped. The memory of that departure of those desperate people going back home stopped. Now, but for 2 weeks you did see them. You did see them. Now, what happened to those 2 weeks? Do you ever wonder where did they actually get home or not? You know how they were beaten up by the cops somewhere? Do you know how they were disinfected by the thousands in some states? Those are memories. But did you actually see them go home? I wonder what happened to them. They must have reached home somewhere. Now, that's a memory. How soon will you forget it? Is the question. Because it's important. The answer lies in this of memory and forgetting. The state needs you to forget. You as an artist have the duty to remember. And that's the crisis. That by its very nature in any state, that is the crisis. Any country, anywhere in the world. It's not just, please understand what I'm getting at. You have no right, your duty is to remember, and the state by its very nature wants you to forget. इसमें आप क्या करेंगे? And it's going to be a tough journey as things are going to get worse, both economically and politically, दुनिया भर में. We cannot go on consuming the way we consume. Fact. There are limitations to consumption. तो क्या करेंगे हम? And plus the fact that we have millions upon millions of people who've seen the good life on television screens and in films. कि घर कैसे होते हैं भैया of the rich and the famous. शादी कैसे होती है of the rich and the famous. नाचते क्या है rich and the famous. Fashion show में कैसा it's all there. And they're seeing it on their television screens and in their films, and they want part of it, and they're not going to get it. नहीं होने वाला है. Now imagine the social implications of this. And by the machine we are producing graduates upon graduates upon graduates. From the 10th, 12th graduates, MA. We have millions every single year, all looking for work. कहाँ जाएंगे? When they don't find work, क्या होगा? Then what will you do? Then you will use religion, patriotism, language. Bihari go back, Uttar Pradesh go back. आप तेलुगु हैं, आप तमिल हैं, आप मुसलमान, आप हिंदू हैं, आप क्रिश्चियन. Imagine this. It's frightening. It's frightening. And it will be used because it's incredible energy of the young. These young people are young, and they have energy and they have aspirations. Why shouldn't they have aspirations? Just as much as you have, why shouldn't they have aspirations for a better life? They want that too. Nahi milne wala hai, by and large. For everyone who gets one, then 99 who don't. That's the truth. We talk about the one, forgetting the 99 who don't. This is where we are at Eshan, and then you also wonder, ab kya karenge? What do we do? Look at the agitation against the migrants in Europe now. Look at the agitation that's occurring in Poland and Hungary and Italy, and look what's happening there also. Look at America, that war against Mexico. Kya ho raha hai wahan? And now you see it. It worries me. It worries me, and does our cinema take this into account? Does it understand this large picture that's emerging? But the state wants you to forget. So we'll have more IPL matches, more WWE. We'll have more OTT platforms, more fashion shows, more marriages, great marriages to talk about, and we will have more pornography, guaranteed. It'll happen. From what I was told, that in this, I got a figure, incredible, that the biggest in this Corona time, the biggest reach in India on the OTT platform was pornography. Did you know that? Pornography. Imagine that.
This brings me to the question that what is your understanding of leftism, and why do you call yourself a leftist Sufi?
Because leftism is not a party member. Leftism is just to be to me personally. No political party will ever have a person like me because I question too much. I cannot belong to any political party because they want you. Every party wants a certain kind of discipline or the rules of the game or whatever. I can't do that. And to me, when I say leftist, it is fundamentally the idea is सबसे बड़े पापी कौन थे? So who's the first leftist in the world? Guess. Gautam Buddha. सबसे पहले पापी वो थे. He was questioning things. He was talking about, at that time, about justice, equity, something wrong. गड़बड़ है कहीं यार. उस जमाने में. So it's continuing. It's not that I'm a new, this whole field. I'm in great company. But the point I'm getting at, I'm not trying to be anything else. I'm not trying to pretend to be anything. I'm just joking. But what I'm getting at, the questioning process. Didn't start with Karl Marx were leftists much earlier. The Sufis, the Bhakti movement, Tukaram, Namdev, Bulle Shah. So they all, what were they? What are these? Who are these people? These people are saying, भैया कुछ गड़बड़ है ये. कबीर, ये कौन थे ये लोग? They were Jyotiba Phule. They were talking about an iniquitous world, yeah, and an unjust world. It's a constant battle. There's no perfect solution. There's no perfect answer. But the point is to try and work towards making life a little better. That's all. There is no utopia, ever. There is no utopia. But to 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 say therefore it does not matter, since there's no utopia, is also, I think, questionable. So when you say leftist Sufi, it's a journey. And what is a battle for? It's a battle for poetry, basically to bring poetry back into the mainstream. हम देखेंगे का मतलब क्या है? The famous poem by Faiz Ahmad Faiz. वो दिन जिसका वादा था हम देखेंगे. It is to try to find, to try to bring poetry back into the discourse, to try to bring a little humanity into the discourse, a little less hate into the discourse, a little more compassion into the discourse. No, that's what it's all about. ज़्यादा नहीं, मगर थोड़ा सा कोशिश करनी चाहिए कि करें. Am I making sense?
Definitely, sir. In our society, talking about discourse, in our society, there's no culture of cultural discourses. Film, cinema, literature, art, and of any sort is just dismissed as mere entertainment only. How do you see this? What are your thoughts on this?
Bulle Shah ने कहा था ना, civilization is a very precarious thing, very precarious, it's very delicate. And उसने कहा कि don't blink, वरना बाजी ले जाएंगे कुत्ते. It's a very, it's civility and decency is a very fragile thing. It's very fragile. It's got to be nurtured and taken care of and protected. Otherwise, we all have in a sense, there's a peculiar thing just below the surface. So the point is, how do we why shouldn't a poor man be incredibly angry? Ask yourself a question. Ask, why shouldn't a poor man who's hardworking, why shouldn't he, a woman who's hardworking, why should Bombay is run on the back of the maids and the cooks and the plumbers and the city is run by them. Haven't they got a raw deal? They've got a raw deal. And yet the city goes on. And I don't know, it's like sorry, the thing is that it's gotten incredibly serious. This entire conversation has gotten incredibly serious, but it's got to be lightened up with. It's got to be lightened up with, I think, poetry and humor. It's important to lighten it up. But we've inherited a pretty dark world. It's a pretty dark world today, and it needs to have a few pranksters around, a few jokers, a few charlatans, and not charlatans in the right sense of the term. And they need to clowns, good clowns around. Very important to have clowns to make. I think this world should right now be run by clowns, and I don't mean the Donald Trump type, but genuine clowns who make people who have laughter in their souls. And then a world perhaps would be I don't know, better.
Yes, and nowadays stand-up comedians are giving news more than the media, as we see in the society that we inherit.
news, I saw a lovely cartoon, and I've used it in my book. There was a cartoon of a massive pig, mother pig, lying down, and she's got 9 or 10 piglets suckling, and it's a cartoon about the Indian media, and the pig is called the regime, and the piglets are called the media. So the point is, everything is seen like an attack, because this hyper nationalism, hyper patriotism, because it seems like whatever you say is going to be misconstrued. And we used to say the same things earlier. Despite the emergency, we had an emergency many, many years ago. Despite that, we said many things, and we weren't shoved into jail and into sedition charges and into it's quite sad. But you realize that it's that the regime is fundamentally a hollow regime. It has the pretense of power. It has the pretense of power, and therefore it can become quite vicious, and it's sad. It's very sad.
Yeah. Coming back to the lighter part of this discussion about films, coming back to the films, I wanted to talk about Naseem, the film, which is in a way your last feature film, and there's this very interesting scene, the last scene, जहाँ पर कैफी साहब के कैरेक्टर का जनाजा उठ रहा है, and there's background music in that scene. कैफी साहब का ही एक song है.
विछड़े समय का बारी बारी देखी समाने की यारी.
जी, तो उस फिल्म के बारे में अगर आप कुछ बताएं, why did you stop making films after Naseem? And you said that you didn't want to make that film democratic in the beginning of the conversation itself.
Because I had nothing more to say. Because you must remember, the film didn't end over there. The film ended of a flashback of Kaifi Saab and Naseem sitting in front of the sea, and she asks her grandfather, "Why is the sky blue?" And he tells her, "I didn't like the color yellow, so I painted it blue." So she says, "Dada, ye koi jawab hua?" It's so unscientific. So he says to her, "It doesn't matter whether it's scientific or not. I made you laugh, I made you smile. That's important. I made you smile." And the film ends there. I made you smile. And that is important, because I cut back to the room. She's sitting there quietly in a room, and she breaks into a half smile as she remembers that moment. And that's why I end the film. The reason of the smile is, despite those circumstances under which things are happening, you have to carry on. And you've got to carry on with a certain spirit, and a little humor, and a little poetry. And don't think you've lost the war, yeah. The battle has been joined. These things happen, dark times come, but then dark times also go, and that's important, because this movement of times and histories are the famous line, "Kiska hai wo?" In the room, women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. So life goes on, and I think we have to see ourselves in the midst of, I think very difficult times, but there is hope. There's a lot of hope. We've got to bring back laughter into the air. We have to bring back joy into the air. We've got to bring back songs into the air. And we've got to bring back poetry. सबसे ज्यादा है कि ये poetry is so critically important, and if we can bring that back, it's not going to solve the problems of malnutrition or hunger or unemployment, but it can start from there. It can start. These are long-term issues that we've got to deal with, but we have to start somewhere with, not with anger and with hate. You solve it with compassion, and if you recognize that there is an issue, you will try to solve it. If you don't recognize the issue, then what is the problem? How will you solve it? I tell you a story. This is in my book, Kundan Shah. He asked me a question. He says, what is your definition of a civilized country? What is your definition of a civilized country? Like, I don't quite know. I think it should be that, how a nation handles or recognizes the anxieties of its weakest links. So he said, you mean the minorities? I said, no, I don't mean minorities. I mean, like, for instance, South Africa was a white ruled minority regime of the whites. It created apartheid. I'm talking about the weakest link, which is the disenfranchised, the powerless. How do you take care of the powerless and the weak and the disenfranchised? Then I said, why do you ask this question? He said, no, I was just saying, do you know what happened in Tunisia? I said, what happened in Tunisia? He said, yeah, that there was a ready wala tha, a cart fellow. He used to sell vegetables on his cart. And he got tired of this police repression and corruption. And he used to keep getting beaten up because he was illegally selling vegetables. He was trying to make a living. He got so tired of the police harassing him. He brought his cart in front of the police station, and then he set himself on fire. He burnt himself to death. And then Kundan said, and then the entire country erupted. One cart person who committed suicide in front of a police station because he was tired of being harassed. He was just trying to earn a living. An entire country erupted and the government changed. They were on the street by the millions. And Kundan said, that is a civilized response. That is a civilized response. You know what I told him? It can never happen here. He said, why? I said, couldn't figure it out. Who runs this country? Who runs this country? And who are the people? Check it out. You think they come on the streets for one radiwala who's burning himself in front of a police station? No, they won't. We have to recognize there is a problem and then something happens. If we don't, what do we do?
Definitely. And yeah, we have to recognize the problem in order to solve it. That's very important to understand. Talking about the collective sense, and in your films you dealt with the individual worldview in a way, seeing the
Yeah.
world through an individual perspective, but you made an evolution of sorts when you entered television. That show Nukkad, it showed collective sense of existence and a perspective that is collective of all. How was that transformation from an individual perspective, a worldview, to a collective worldview?
No, it was remember that time there was a partnership. There was Aziz Mirza, Saeed Mirza, and Kundan Shah. Three was a partners in television series. Three of us. So the thing was that we decided to do a serial which was to break grounds, a non-aspirational serial. In other words, bring down your character. In other words, the characters have not to be upscale, but people. First things first, we said, this is it. So it's a down and out area with down and out people, but they celebrate life. They celebrate life. They don't give up. they celebrate. बड़े शहर में एक गली में बसा हुआ है नुक्कड़, इस नुक्कड़ के सारे बाशिंदे तकदीरों से फक्कड़। अजब तमाशा है ये नगरी दुख में हंसते गाते हैं, अपनी बर्बादी का यारो ये तो जश्न मनाते हैं। मिलते हैं झगड़ते हैं, लड़ते हैं झगड़ते हैं, मिलते झगड़ते हैं यारो। This is it was about people. And also you must remember, Eshan, despite the fact that I came from a middle class family and I had a middle class upbringing, I went to an elite school and an elite college. I never lost track of the fact that I learned a lot from taxi drivers, bus conductors, rickshaw pullers, I mean, blacks, chalas, waiters. On the ground, critically important. You spent time. Then you went into, when you were going a little elder, you went into those little illegal bars and you were having a. But the point is, you picked up from the streets. You picked up life's lessons also from there, along with books, along with your other experiences, but you also picked up from here. And that gave you a kind of a grounding, which is very important. So the fact that I did go to an elite school and an elite college is true, but I did not lose sight of the fact that all people are part of your world simultaneously. I never lost sight of that fact. So I think, and no Aziz, no Kundan. So that's very critically important. So that was it. It was celebrating these people who are supposedly down and out, but they're not. They're fighters, and they fight. Don't dismiss them. They're there. That was the hope. That was the hope that we wanted to bring. Hope. I'm not so sure now, but there was a time.
And was that this hope and this connect with the street that led you to write your first book, Ammi, Letter to the Democratic Mother?
Yeah, but again, my mother. That lady was one of the most democratic women in the world that I've ever met. And she used to pray 5 times a day. I couldn't believe it. She celebrated Holi and Diwali and Christmas. And the point was, she would up with the news and yet so generous in her outlook. So incredibly generous in her outlook towards people and lives. And to me, she was, we had a maid called Asha, and Asha ate with us on the dining table. Now that's ate. This is a point of view. To my mother. She believed people were equal. It was not a statement to be. She believed it. It is not a comment from Karl Marx or something. No, she's not read Karl Marx. Who the hell is Karl Marx? She believed people are equal. That's it. Now, if you believe that, you don't have to be a textbook scholar. It came from her life. And that's the way she was. So, when you're brought up in that atmosphere, and the conversation on politics, it is incredible. I mean, to me, it is that kind of nurturing that you get, and arguments with me about the existence of God. It is incredible. Here is the leftist who disagrees with God, doesn't believe in God, and there she is making a case for it is all allowed. All allowed. When I decided I would not go to pray any longer, she said, fine, okay, don't pray. I'm 10 years old. I've stopped believing in God. She was trying her, but she, her attempt to teach me Urdu. बहुत कोशिश की उन्होंने मुझे सिखाना. थोड़ी बहुत सीख लिया मैंने, मगर I find it difficult to read, but but these are great people, wonderful people, and if you're brought up in that kind of a milieu, it is, you're blessed. You're blessed. One day she asked me a question about, tell me, she called me Sadhu, why does Russia or China have only one political party? Why? So I told her that, the party represents the working people, etc., the interests of the working people, etc. Therefore, why do you have to I can't make an excuse. Therefore, why do you need more parties? Because if it represents everybody, why do you need? And her answer was so simple. She said, every worker does not think the same way. Every father does not think the same way. Every mother does not. So why can't they have 10 workers' parties? Why? What? It was her attempt to say, भैया, और भी होने चाहिए. ये क्या है? It was her response. And I'd like any Marxist to explain this to her. I'd like any Marxist to answer her question. Why one political party? It'll be damn tough to answer her. Because every worker does not, workers of the world unite. Every worker doesn't think the same way. Every worker is a father and a mother and whatever, and a sister and a daughter, and they don't think the same way. So therefore, and our interests only material, or are they also emotional? वो फर्क जो होता है ना इन चीजों में, that's this is the way I was brought up. So so this is a very generous lady, and so is my father. So between the two of them, we had a very holistic upbringing as children, and we were those values that they gave us were very strong. If you realize that my sister married a Hindu, my brother married a Hindu, I married a Christian, so क्या दिक्कत क्या है इसमें? अभी कहेंगे love jihad, what am I supposed to do? क्या है? But these are, to me, it was so unimportant. Just to the issue of religion, and I don't know, it is sad.
Circling back to film, you were also part of, you kind of founded a forum for better cinema.
Yes.
Do you recall that, and do you see a difference between good cinema and bad cinema?
No, there was a forum for better cinema. We started a forum. It started in my house, actually. It started with 4 or 5 of us, and then it spread to all India. And we sent a petition. We sent messages to all across India, to Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Punjab, Bengal, Odisha, Assam. And we asked writers, poets, painters, musicians, filmmakers, playwrights to join us. Because what we were doing was, we were telling the government of India, कि भैया देखिए we require a platform for what we call serious cinema. Because the theaters that existed would show the most popular kinds of cinemas and alternatives. So what we are saying is that that platform has to shift. So if the government of India made 100 theaters all over the country, just 100 theaters all over the country of 200 seaters for alternative cinema, serious cinema would have a platform on which to exist and to start. You know, Ishan, every single artist in the country, every single one, from Ravi Shankar to Satyajit Ray to Ustad Vilas Khan to Bhimsen and Joshi, they all signed. Correct, we agree with you. They signed with us. Every single poet, writer, filmmaker, musician, vocalist agreed, and they said, we sent this petition to the government, and they said, this is what we want. Because if you claim that cinema is art, then you should have a platform also simultaneously. But as with all good intentions, it did not work. So the net conclusion that we came to was that the government of India, frankly, does not quite care enough for the fate of what you would call serious cinema. That was the way it was. And you must remember there must have been about at least 300 signatures onto it of incredibly eminent people of literature, films, painting, music, arts. 300 names on it. It didn't matter. They all Padma Vibhushan to Padma Shri, sab the usme. It didn't make a difference because I don't know. And what was the attempt? The attempt was to say, Bhaiya, we need a platform so that we believe that there are enough people in everywhere who would like to see serious work, but only they need an opportunity to see it. If my film is only showing in Kerala, how are people in Bombay see the film? You know, how a person from Bombay see a film of Adur Kupala Krishna in Bombay? Or Arvindan, you know, or a money call in Bengal, or something. You know. So therefore, if there was a platform across the country that every single state capital had 2 theaters and another town in every state, 3 theaters in every state, we would be able to manage it. So that was called the Forum for Better Cinema. And we all signed it with great, it was 1981 or 82, I think. It was 82, I think. Didn't work.
And you know, that also brings to the floor the role of NFDC, National Film Distribution Corporation, and what role did they play in for?
Oh, it was an incredible role that they played initially. But they should have also been interested in distribute. I think as a producer, they did not, once they gave you the money, they did not interfere with what you did. But I think they failed in the role of overseas distribution. It was so critical, the role that they could have played, which would have made films much more viable. They didn't play that important a role. And therefore, the film suffered. The filmmakers suffered a lot because suddenly a source of when a film is unsuccessful financially in quotes because if it couldn't be seen, how would it be successful? You know, it had to be seen. So there was an international market always available for this kind of cinema, which wasn't really tapped. I remember we made a sale of Arvind Desai in Germany, a television screening of a sale of Arvind Desai. The cost of the film was recovered in one television sale. The cost of Arvind Desai was recovered with one television sale in Germany. It says a lot. We recovered our costs. Albert Pinto recovered the cost in over. The NFDC played its role.
Yeah. Coming to the last part of our conversation. So, what is the importance of preserving films and importance of film archiving, according to you?
Critical. What is archiving is memory. I keep making a case for memory. When you lose memory, you become an animal. It's a very simple thing. Memory. When you lose that, what's the difference between you and an animal? It's so critical that because it does chronicle time also. It chronicles the period. Like for instance, you'll understand a time when you our country, when you see its cinema, or its documentaries, its television sales, you will recall a time. And for me, that's very, very important to films and restoration and preservation, very important, very, very important.
Now is the part that would interest young audience, filmmakers, film enthusiasts, and everyone. The recommendations part. So we have three, we have three categories for you to for us to ask you. One is the book recommendation, books that you think everyone must read.
Well, if you have books on cinema, there are 10,000 books on cinema. You get them, you can go to any library, you go to any, you say books on cinema, you make your choice. But along with that, I would like to recommend other things. Along with that, I'd like to see a person, because those books are available on cinema. You have from screenplay writing courses to Godard to Antonioni to somebody, some great filmmaker giving his talk, giving his autobiography. All that's all there. More important than that, I mean, that's also important, but along with that, I would like to know, okay, your understanding of, say, of history, architecture, music, poetry. If you, of the arts, of painting, I think these are very critical elements that you need to know about when you enter the field of cinema. Music, the history of music, both Indian and classical and Western. And it's a vast area of discovery. If I recommend a few names, like for instance, if I say take a history of India, let's take India, I would recommend a book like, and not about films, Lokayat by Devi Prasad Chattopadhyay. Now, what is this book about? Lokayat is the chronicles Indian materialist philosophy, not spiritual. We always think that all our scriptures are spiritual. There was an entire school of thought which talked to you about living and material conditions of how and why. It's called Lokayat. If you read on history, D.D. Kosambi on history, Iravati Karve on history, Irfan Habib on history, or you can read Arnold Hauser on Western civilization, John Berger on art, on art appreciation. You can have, there's 1,000 things. What I'm getting at is it's so vast, the area, and it's endless, but you are continuously learning in this process of this journey. It's endless, and you keep adding to your material, you're adding to your information, you're adding to your wisdom, and that's the way it is. There's no end to it, Eshan. There's no end to it. But it's a great journey. Once you get involved, you just read a John Berger I don't know, the look of things or ways of seeing. It blow your mind. Iravati Karve on Yugantar. Kosambi on history. This is stuff that, this is beyond cinema. But it is part of your environment, part of your understanding of because you're not just, it's your cultural, philosophical being was also simultaneously being sort of, is also happening. So I think all these things are Natya Shastra. किसी ने पढ़ी है ना, तो पढ़ो. These are elements of journeys. Read Kyon also. Read them. Don't read Manusmriti. Waste of time. Because what I'm getting at is these are things from our civilization. That read. I don't know. Amir Khosrow. The works of Amir Khosrow. My God, what a man! But I'm saying these are journey, and it's endless. It's endless, Eshan. It's not just a book. It's not just a book. It's an idea. You're dealing with ideas, and it should be broad and encompassing and huge. And in that is your journey. A book here and there, ठीक है यार, वो ठीक है.
And
sorry.
Yes, sir. You were naming another book.
No, like Arnold House of the History of Western Civilization. यार देखो, it's vast. Glance through it. ये नहीं कि आपको हर पन्ना पढ़ना है. नहीं, मगर you get an idea.
Thank you for those recommendations, and I think all of us must read these, and some of them are amazing, and I have read them, and they are life changing for
There you are.
Second part is feature films and filmmakers that you admire.
Oh gosh, I can by the hundreds. Today's, I don't know. I like, there are lots of filmmakers that I like. A lot of filmmakers that I like. I like an Italian filmmaker called On Me. I like his work very much. He's a very quiet filmmaker, very quiet, and I like his work. It's very deep in ways. I like the work of Arvind, I like the work of Mani Kaul. But in today's time, the younger filmmakers, I like the work of so many. People are so good. There's a filmmaker called Amit Datta. वो कहीं हिमाचल में है. He does his own kind of stuff. Amit Datta. Then Gurvinder Singh एक और है. वो भी अपना काम कर रहे हैं. I like the work of this boy, Tamane, who made Court, Chaitanya Tamane. I like his work, and these are I also like the work of, I don't think, Manju Dhulia or Sudhir Mishra. Lots of people I like, but overdrive that's occurring. People are doing too many things, too much of it. Take time, take a break, breathe. Because this OTT is a machine, it's a monster. And money is also a monster. It's a monster that can devour you. To keep making and making, because this is like, this is it needs you to keep creating, and if it doesn't matter what you do now, you can keep creating, and it'll keep allowing you to create. But you've got to stop yourself and think a little, because it's important. Because we are in I think, scoundrel times. We are in scoundrel times, and it's one should be aware of it. Okay. Just to create for the sake of creation is a pointless exercise. It's pointless. It's just absolutely pointless. Look at the stuff that you're getting, and you want to know why. I mean, what is it about? But every channel has this great amount of violence and great amount of sex and a great amount of and there's drama and there's more drama and and somehow you feel that terror. Just bring it down. Calm down. Just calm down. Bring the temperature down a little. 10 minutes of, let's make a film of silence. Just silence of 1 घंटे के लिए. Just show me a sea for 1 hour. Just let me see it. Because it's important. We have been inundated. And it's required, the times require it. Thou shalt not think. Thou shalt see porn or something. You do. Just have a great time. Look at a video game, yeah? Look at the stuff that's happening. There's mayhem and violence and slaughter and enemies and taking over empires and killings and oof. But yeah, it's sad. Very sad. And butchering each other and what is it all about? It's sad. That's why that's why that boy Amit Atta and and Gurvinder and Chetan Tamane. There's a calmness. There is a terror. There is calm down, yeah. Everything is overheated. Everything is so incredibly overheated. Am I right or wrong?
You're absolutely right. We are living in times.
Overheated times.
Yes. Yeah.
And the biggest thing is violence and pornography. It seems to work. I mean, actual pornography. I'm not talking about erotic cinema. I'm talking pornography it's been the biggest boost sales of pornographic films. Sure, outright pornography in India, and seen by very lovely, respectable upper middle class people. I love this. Look at it's incredible. This is true, but it's also sad. It's also incredibly sad where we are at. It's sad. It's a reflection of our times and our civility and our civilization. Kya kar rahe hain? What are we doing?
Yes. I'll come to my last question, and that is about your experience at Karwaan. How, if you want to talk about it.
Sorry?
About Karwaan, how was your experience of talking?
I'll tell you what it is. I saw one of your interviews. You did one interview with Adur Gopalakrishnan. That's why I know. And what I liked was that Karwaan as an experiment is so important for our times, because we need time to reflect about our times. And Karwaan gives the viewer that experience about our times. And through that, it can talk about cinema or literature or poetry or music. It is important for people to take time out to reflect, to think. And that to me is very critical. And that's the role that's being played by this young boy called Eshan Sharma. I wish him all the best.
Thank you so much, sir. And it was truly an honor for me. It was like a achievement of my lifetime that I got to talk with you for such a long time. And I think this was one of the longest interviews that you had.
Well, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure talking to you, young man. Take care. Take care.
Thank you so much, sir.
बड़े शहर की एक गली में बसा हुआ है नुक्कड़, नुक्कड़ के सारे बाशिंदे तकदीरों से पकड़, अलग अलग तकदीर है सबकी, अलग अलग है बोली, अपने अपने धंधे सबके, अपनी अपनी टोली, अजब तमाशा है ये नगरी, दुख में हंसते गाते हैं, अपनी बर्बादी का यारों ये तो जश्न मनाते हैं, मिलते हैं, बिछड़ते हैं, लड़ते हैं, झगड़ते हैं, मिलते बिछड़ते हैं, लड़ते झगड़ते हैं, गिलते संभलते हैं।